Nadia, how are you feeling today?
Hi, Daniel. How are you? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I will answer first, then I will let you answer that
For sure.
question. I'm feeling very good, actually. It's been a good Monday. So the priorities, I've set the priorities for the week. I feel I'm set, I'm focused on my targets and the resources which I need. All the ducks are in a row, so to speak. But also because I had a very, very good weekend, and I feel how important it is nowadays to really take time to switch off from the working days and really make sure that during weekends I unwind, I let go, I get a good rest, I do things that I really enjoy, because then Monday is less stressful somehow.
Yeah. I resonate with that, and you made me remember of some strategies that I use or have learned, not recently, because I can't say recently now, to help myself and my well-being. I can't say it was a very good start of the week, because I received some bad news, as I was sharing with you before.
I'm sorry about that.
A colleague of mine. But I could take on that news because I was grounded, and I was grounded because I took care of my well-being during the weekend. And one of the techniques I've started using almost a year ago now, I started journaling online. I have an online journal, a personal journal, which you can subscribe as well. It's online, it's out there, and I post weekly articles of how my week was, my struggles, my wins, anything that was worth highlighting during that week. So I dedicate an hour or two on Sunday evening to reflect on how my week was and to express myself in writing. And when I do that, I feel grounded. The effects came out very recent, so it took a while. I don't usually express myself through writing, but since a couple of months now, I'm starting to feel very at ease. So that is one way of how I ground myself at the start of the week. So when I plan the following week, I close the week before, and then I plan the next one.
This is very interesting, Daniel. The power of when we write something and you write something down, it's almost as if you are committing to it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're also, there's a process. I remember when I was doing the NLP and the Master Practitioner course for NLP as well. And actually, we had to handwrite most of our assignments. And I was very curious about that, because nowadays everything is about AI and the power of generative AI and the digital world, not pen and paper. That, by the way, I love pen and paper. It's the most wonderful time of the year for me, because when September starts, I still go and replenish my stationery, and I have all my new pens and paper. I love that.
That nostalgia effect,
It's
right?
the nostalgia. Yes. I'm coming from the 1980s, sort of that era, and we all loved our paper books and our pen and paper. However, there is that said, like you are mentioning, there is actually, a process that one goes through. In fact, even during the mentoring sessions that I do conduct, both myself and also when I go through my own mentoring sessions, I also write quite a lot. And that process in itself, it's a realization when you actually, both of the struggles, but also even if you need to change a few things, somehow the penny drops when you write down the struggles, the challenges, your objectives, your targets. The path is more clear. So I think I didn't know that you had a journal. I'll definitely subscribe to that.
Thank you very much. It's called Growth Diary.
There had to be growth featuring somewhere.
That's why I started, because it's part of the lineup of GROWTHShcema, and that is why I started, because if I want to advocate about self-growth, I have to be the one practicing what I've preached.
Totally.
So it's not something. I had to step outside my comfort zone because, as I said, I'm not the type to write things down usually, even in class. I rarely wrote things down. So I remembered, and then I watched videos. I'm a visual learner or tactile learner. So I'm not the type to write. But I said, this might be an opportunity for me to step outside my comfort zone and to try a different medium for me to learn and grow about myself. And I can see its fruits now.
You've mentioned repeatedly, Daniel, stepping outside of your comfort zone, And I know it sounds a little bit of a cliche because we read it so much, even in abbreviations or in whenever on LinkedIn, you find it very often. When you step out of your comfort zone, this is when you experience true growth. However, it's true. I find that through my experience throughout these years, and I push myself continuously to be able to step outside of that comfort zone, because that is when growth really happens. When you don't have now people, we were discussing this before we started. We love our plans, we love our strategies, we love this is what we do with our clients. Myself, this is what I do with my clients. However, the beauty of it, of growth especially, is when it happens unplanned.
Yeah.
Actually, when there is no plan and you don't really know and you're unsure of the outcome. And this is because when you feel those jitters, when you're very uneasy, when maybe you don't really sleep well at night because you're thinking about the aftermath. However, afterwards, the power that experience actually gives you personally to be able to grow even further and even motivate others. Because nowadays I feel that is our main mission as leaders. We don't need to wait for people to inspire us or leaders to inspire us. If we can inspire others through our work, and if we can enable others to overcome their own challenges, their own barriers, I believe that is very heartwarming almost.
So being there for others is very important, and that is why business exists. So to solve problems. Last week I had the pleasure and the opportunity to become a mentor for the first time for the young enterprise. So I'm being introduced very recently to the project. I have been asked to join last year, but I couldn't make it. So this year I tried. Let me try to support it. So this will be my first experience, and I saw young people who are starting their own journey on, not necessarily in business, but I think it's their first step outside of what they know. It's the beauty of having an idea and trying to make it real, trying to materialize it in some way, shape, or form. That is power. That is power, because if you have the ability to think that you are able to create something that you're thinking, that is power, because you're comfortable in expressing yourself, you're confident in your ability, and you know that you're not afraid to fail in a way, and those are key traits that you're mentioning, that stepping outside of your comfort zone.
Totally, Daniel. In fact, I do, as part of my pro bono work, I help a number of startups, a significant number of startups, mostly European ones that are based in Europe, based in Malta, or working from Malta to the world. Still, we are not very well accustomed, European-wise, to failure. We still haven't made peace with the fact that when you're starting a new idea, there is a very big percentage that it might not be successful and one would fail for various reasons, either because of lack of cash flow or because of the right support, not investing into the market and analyzing and researching the market well enough, not having enough strong MVP and market entry. So there could be a number of difficulties that startups face, especially in their early days. Yeah. However, seeing the potential, like you were mentioning, Daniel, of individuals that usually have this idea, and once you go through the first, second, and third sessions, testing whether this idea could actually go and have the potential to go and be launched into the market, and eventually it does, it's so rewarding, actually. Yes, it is power. It is powerful. And even though that we don't have that culture, we're not that accustomed of failure, once we fail, even I have difficulty even saying it, as even myself, I must admit, when I'm criticized, or we all nowadays we suffer a lot, and I think it's a subject that is being researched quite a lot about imposter syndrome and all the difficulties that people face because they are challenges and of different, from either from their upbringing or because they think that they don't know enough or because they think that they are not good enough. And we have our mini imposters surrounding us daily, basically. So it's having somebody thinking about all this, but still overcoming it and coming forward with the idea to present it, to share it with others, it's extremely powerful. It's extremely powerful.
On the note of imposter syndrome, I think it's okay to experience doubts and to experience imposter syndrome. I think that's quite human and quite natural. However, if you go through it, because this happened to me, so as I was discussing before, am I able to start the podcast? Am I able to be a consultant to a company? I still have a lot to learn in the field, and I'm learning as I go along. So I did have this idea, and although today is not as present because I've overcame that, I'm sure that I will experience it in the future if I try something new or try something which is a little bit outside my comfort zone again. But to me it was critical to realize that, okay, I'm experiencing this. What strategies I can implement with what I've learned so far to overcome it? So you might not go head on and say, I'm afraid of public speaking, for example. You might not organize a conference of 500 delegates and you go off and give a speech, but maybe speak up in front of your friends or family. It might sound silly, but it's embarrassing to speak about something you love in front of your family. And so it might be so small and rudimental, but it will still give you that jitters, that feels. So
small steps in the right direction, Daniel, I believe, like you are mentioning. It's the road can be treacherous for some more than others, because obviously there are challenges along the way. And we will have the naysayers, we will have them. There is no doubt about that. We will be criticized the more we help others, and the more we are successful. We are attracting more people towards us. Some people will like what we're saying, others might criticize us. So it's a natural part of our growth. And the most important thing is, like you're mentioning, is to have a support system also, a network of trusted individuals that can help you along the way, as the journey can be lonely. Can be lonely, because obviously this is your idea, and even though you portray it and explain it, no one believes in your idea. Like we were mentioning startups, we were mentioning businesses. Nowadays, I sit with founders that have been in operation for 10 years and 15 years, with family businesses that have been operating for 40 plus years. And still, Daniel, they find that the difficulty of letting go, because this emotional attachment that they have with the idea of their own initial idea that they had 40 years ago, it's extremely difficult for them to believe that they can actually let it go and allow others to be able to create and co-create with them.
Yeah.
They feel that they can do it on their own. So I think the in each and every aspect of the trajectory of a business, whether when there's somebody starting up or it's a fully fledged run business, a small, medium-sized, we have a lot of SMEs locally on the island as well. I believe that everyone goes through the same symptoms in different ways. Yeah. And it's so powerful when one realizes that in order to achieve growth, in whichever aspect one is looking at growth, because growth is a very wide term, is to be able to change whatever is not working.
Okay.
Because if you are going to continue doing the same things day in, day out, from as simple as an individual, for instance, what you're saying, that I would like to dedicate more time to my family, for instance.
Yeah.
As I'm working a little bit too much, whatever is too much is irrelevant. That's, the right balance. So I would really like to find the balance, and during the weekend, that's it. I switch off from my laptop, I switch off from my phone, and I dedicate my time with my family. Then we come on Monday, I ask the question to the same individual, like, okay, so what happened during the weekend? I only had a meeting until noon on Saturday. So again, what I'm trying to say is that if we continue doing the same things without making minor changes to our behaviors, to our routine, to our attitudes, we will end up achieving the same results.
Yeah.
So really the discipline of saying, no, this should change, this is going to alter. I'm going to dedicate time, I'm going to make space to allow this dream that I have to go actually forward, or actually I need to save to be able to do something different. So because we end up in meetings, or I end up in friendly conversations, even with my friends. I don't know if it happens to you, Daniel. However, it's like, and we're discussing the same issues and the same challenges, or the same problems of what is not allowing us to achieve something, for example.
That is where I draw the boundary then, because it happens to me, so first of all, and that is where I draw a boundary. In what sense? That if I am, I tend to be a good listener most often, obviously because of my line of work, so I tend to listen and I don't mind that. But if I'm listening something on repeat and I notice a pattern there, I usually flag it out to the person. It can be a very close friend of mine. And if the person is always stumbling in the same spot and the person is receiving advice from me or other people on the same thing and giving a blueprint on what to do to get out of that sticky situation, whatever that may be, and the person is still being stubborn and repeating what they are already doing, that is where I draw the line and say, listen, I've already told you my suggestion. I would prefer to speak about different things when we meet, because it becomes one-sided. The conversation would become one-sided. So, and
what happens when you take it into a work context, Daniel? However, because with friends, maybe drawing boundaries, I find it, especially with close friends, it might be easier.
Yeah.
However, within a work context, when obviously you need to draw some boundaries, because of behavioral changes
Yes.
that you would need to enforce within a company, because
Yeah.
otherwise you're creating a precedent, for example.
Yeah.
How would you do that? How would you deal that if the individual repeatedly, consistently insists of continuously doing the same behavior?
I would shift accountability. So let's say, if we take a step back, there needs to be a structure in place first of all. So if there is a structure in place and the person is, arriving late at work, which is very common. So the person is arriving late at work, and there is a system. There's the handbook and HR, there's the employee handbook or the manual, and there are rules, policies, procedures, and you have to be at work by this time, if it's specified. If it is specified, and the person is not abiding by that is already there are grounds for disciplinary action in the context of work. Now, let's say we don't want to, because I take discipline very seriously in the sense that, to me, the disciplinary approach is very linked to the company's mission, values, and sort of culture that they want to promote internally. So you might not issue a warning, for example, but you might find some form of collaboration with the individual. So, okay, arriving at 8 might be difficult for you, but what would you say would be suitable enough time for you to come to work? I think it's 7:45 might be reasonable. So you're saying that from tomorrow you can start arriving at work by that time. So it's about using coaching strategies in a way to have the person arrive. And I shifted accountability. So I'm not punishing the person. I'm being understanding to the point that I know the structure. I know that the person knows the structure. If not, I make them aware of the structure. But then guiding the person to a position where both me as the company and the person are comfortable in working. So trying to not accommodate.
Interesting.
But,
Interesting way
yeah.
of shifting accountability. I think it's, especially with the younger cohorts and younger generation, it is more and more effective. It's becoming more effective of having this coaching approach rather than the hard and fast rule with the disciplinary action, whereas it should still be there, because I believe that there should be boundaries.
Yes.
That if not respected, then one needs to escalate them. However, before even getting there, and one should actually avoid getting to arriving at that stage, one would, doing the coaching and mentoring approach, as a leader, that was my preferred methodology and as a preferred option, to lead as a coach, to lead as a mentor, to be able to motivate and inspire others through a coaching and mentoring approach, even through my C-suite team. And I believe that is really, really effective, effective. Because you can, it's also very versatile, and it cuts across, not simply the younger generation, but even across the board, even with others that are maybe used into more rigid systems.
Yeah.
So, however, you also mentioned, Daniel, boundaries.
Yeah.
And also drawing boundaries and shifting responsibilities. And I believe that is the case in every situation, because you reminded me, even when I sit on boards, boundaries should be very clear as well during conversations, that there are some boundaries that cannot be crossed. And a lot of mentoring and a lot of coaching happens even within that context, especially when you have, again, family-run businesses with family members occupying too many hats.
Yes.
Because they are the executives, they are also the directors, they are also managers within the organization. So they have to shift from one hat to another. And over there, one needs to actually give feedback in a coaching manner to ensure that those boundaries are being crossed and it doesn't eventually make financial or business sense, rather than going head on, straight on. But the boundaries are still there.
What would you say is the biggest hurdle for people or companies to get to that point?
Which point exactly, Daniel?
To establish and follow through boundaries.
I find it, this is you've just touched a sore point, Daniel. And I'm happy you actually did, because this is something that I feel that companies nowadays, especially through my work, through when I'm coaching C-suites, managing strategy discussions and strategy organizations, strategy discussions with different organizations at board level, boundaries are missing. There aren't clear boundaries for what. There isn't a clear answer to the question, what happens if we don't achieve this result collectively?
Mm-hmm.
So if we're saying that we're going to grow by 20%,
Mm-hmm.
this coming year, 2024. At the moment, it's a time, because most companies, their financial accounts are January to December. So obviously they start preparing budgets so that come January, hopefully we all hit the ground running with all our KPIs, our targets, OKRs, and so on and so forth. And the pressure is on. However, there isn't enough thought about, again, what happens if we don't? And what happens if you do?
Yeah.
So conversations and asking, probing with questions of where do the boundaries lie? Where is break-even point for us? What is allowed from an HR strategy point of view, or what is not being allowed? Where are we venturing, and how are we going to ensure that we are constantly adapting to the changes that are happening in the external environment? There isn't enough questioning to ensure that those boundaries are clear, not solely at the C-suite level, but at each and every level of the organization.
Very interesting. You are thinking more on the present. I was thinking more on the future, in the sense that what I find missing is the purpose. It might not be the organizational purpose, but the individual purpose. Why or what am I fighting for? Where do I stand? Where are my values? The questions that we ask ourselves: where do I position myself with this? And does the company position itself with this? And my example, I've mentioned the values of the companies. So if the values of the company is to harness a family-like environment, not a family-like environment, but in the sense that everyone's treated fairly, those values govern every decision that I'm going to take.
Totally.
So, and this decision is derived by the purpose of the company. My purpose as the person representing HR of the company. So I was thinking more on the purpose and the future side of things rather than the present. But it's very interesting you mentioned that what happens if we don't do this? What are the consequences if we don't take action on what is happening at the moment? So that is very powerful as well.
It's quite a simple question, and sadly, regrettably, I don't think we ask that question often enough. Those questions are there to make us think, to make the individual think. Even on other subjects which we mentioned earlier, Daniel. What happens if we don't? What happens if I continue doing what I'm doing? Where I'm going to end December 2024? Am I missing any opportunities for growth? If growth is one of my values, is one of my purpose.
Yeah.
Because it might not be, because obviously the name of our podcast is about growth. So we're assuming that everyone maybe perhaps has that as a value.
Yeah.
However, not everyone does. Daniel.
I don't think so. No.
There are different people with different aspirations, and I respect that actually. And I think it should be respected both ways. however. Because if you are an individual, for example, within a very high growth setup as a business, then it's very hard for that individual to continue fitting within that framework, within that context. So it should be, that individual should be responsible enough in order to say, because there's a mindset. Growth is a mindset.
It is a mindset, yeah.
It is a mindset that where people question constantly, where people look at things in a different way, different perspective. Even just our conversation, I was looking at the growth and the boundaries from one aspect. You were looking at growth from a different aspect, and it's still relevant. And this is the beauty of it, because there's no really right or wrong, actually. It's just how aligned it is with the current context. However, there are individuals, yes, and there are companies as well, that I find it really hard, however, because nowadays, if you don't grow, you're just out of the market immediately.
Yes. You made me remember of another aspect, and this is another, what is the word I'm looking for?
Is it a contentious subject?
It is a contentious subject, and the word is, it's very, it's a buzzword. Let's do it. It's a buzzword at the moment. So I'm going to combine two buzzwords, growth, toxicity. Growth, although it's very beneficial, it can be as toxic to us as well. And you made me remember of this because not everyone, when you made this statement, not everyone might be looking for growth and say why a person would not seek growth. And one of the answers that came to mind was that the person might be satisfied with what they have. And that is actually very respectable. So if you're constantly seeking growth, personally, on the business side, it's okay to constantly seek growth because you're keeping your business relevant. But on the personal level, if you're constantly seeking growth and never settling, it means that you're never really okay with who you are. So that's very counterintuitive in a way. So to me, a person who is not necessarily growing, but is serene, is at peace with themselves, they're okay where they are, they're happy in their relationships, they're happy in their employment. It doesn't mean that they don't have any problems, but they're okay where they are at. I think that's respectable.
This is such an interesting subject which you've picked. You've decided to pick on this one. It's just such a sensitive subject, because it resonates so much with my growth experience, Daniel, actually. And in fact, I had to go through a lot of challenges myself to not to let it be toxic. So, growing up, I was the eldest of three. That comes with a number of challenges, because being the eldest, you always somehow, without knowing, even though...
I'm the eldest of three too.
Okay, so we can relate on
yes.
that. Somehow you have extra pressure, not from parents as such. However, you feel that, because obviously you're the first one, so you need to give example to your siblings, to my other two sisters. So somehow there was this extra added pressure. At school, it didn't make it much easier, I must admit, because we were with the nerdish class. I was part of the nerdish group. So we had the pressure that we had to be the best. We had to get the good grades and the best grades. So 80 wasn't good enough. 70 was not good at all. So everything had to be 80, 85. And again, not really from the parents, but again from pressures, from the cohorts, even from the school itself. Moving and taking that mindset then to a work environment with the adolescent years, going into a mixed school after the secondary school. That was such a difficult year. It was such a huge hodgepodge of emotions and coming to grips. In fact, my junior college years, I remember very clearly, I was very lost. I was very, very lost, as if you don't really belong, but then you belong, then you're coming to grips with what am I going? This is why I empathize with most youngsters nowadays, as I remember those years as being extremely difficult. And I did really poorly at school. Somehow I went to university, and that is where the challenges again started coming up because of the subjects you choose and the friends, and then I started settling down a little bit more. And this is when I started venturing outside, and then I went to live in Greece, and then I studied in Greece. I learned Greek. Anyways, then over there, I really tested those boundaries. Okay. Really, in any shape and form, basically, in any way and possible way. And that was real growth. That is where I believe that Nadia was born, really. That was early 20s. You somehow think less, do more. It was such an exciting and challenging period at the same time. It was equally as exciting as challenging. However, that is where, in fact, even talking about it, perhaps you could see even my demeanor. I'm very passionate because it reminds me of so many good things, in the sense I made a lot of friends. I had the opportunity to work against all odds because I didn't really know the language in the beginning. And again, it was a little bit serendipity. I found the job, then I continued studying. And then when I returned to Malta, anyways, I won't bore you with the details, but the rest is history. My point is that I was on this trajectory that what was good enough? So I was like, nothing seemed to be good enough. Constantly on this growth and looking and then doing studies, because with studies, again, when you're doing interviews, they would want to have your academic qualifications together with your experience, because somehow you needed both. Then so somehow I was like, then when I managed to get the role as a CEO at the age of 34, I was like, oh, okay. So there's some good in what I'm doing, which is fine, but what next? So anyways, the moral of the story is, Daniel, that it had actually, it's only recently, a few years ago, where I had to come to grips and I had to learn what, I'm still very passionate about growth and about personal growth and overcoming boundaries and challenges that every person decides to choose to create for himself or herself. However, I believe that there is an appreciation of when you're good enough, an appreciation of when you stop going through that, through the journey of it's never good enough, when it becomes toxic, that you continuously search for to be content, to be at a level where you say, where you're grateful of what you are, who you are, and whom you represent. Notwithstanding that, obviously, you realize that you still need to continue growing. However, it's a different form. It's a different shape, which was going to be very, very unhealthy.
It's learning how to rest as well. Last week, I was giving some workshops on productivity, and one of the aspects that is often overlooked in productivity is resting. Resting is part of productivity. Now, there has to be a healthy ratio between work and rest, but again, there needs to be a healthy ratio. Resting is very much important, is as important as being productive in the sense that you're working on something. So Yes, growth is definitely a lifelong journey because we continuously grow throughout our life. It's inevitable, so it's like change is the only constant, you know, and growth is as well. But the intensity to which we grow, or it's totally different. It comes in chapters and it goes in ups and downs. One thing that you've mentioned that I wanted to touch upon as well, more specifically is that when youngsters feel lost in their career path. This is something that I've experienced as well. I never dreamt of being in HR, so it's something that I was almost to some extent against in a way, because I saw HR as a very rigid role from outside looking in. And I didn't want, it's not my philosophy basically, so I didn't want to be that kind of individual. But there is the hard versus brain debate, and I would say I always advocate this to when I meet young people, that at that age when you're still, if you're undecisive what you want to become, just follow your heart. In this situation, your heart will tell you. It's not a situation where you have to find the balance. In this case, I would say follow your heart, and then by time you'll be able to merge the heart and the brain. But if you don't follow if the heart is not content, you will not find peace. So the world will show you the way.
Before we started, we mentioned learning by doing.
Yeah.
And this is where your heart calls. Sometimes, like when I mentioned in my 20s, I used to think less and do more. And actually, I used to follow, if I had to put it on paper, actually, and rationalize it through and put a plan through, probably I wouldn't have gone. Because Greece wasn't thriving at that time, wasn't really actually a country. It wasn't the UK. Actually, a lot of people were asking me, why Greece? Obviously, I had friends there, I had connections there, so it made it a bit easier. However, it wasn't exactly usually the country one would choose as a career move or for a career growth. So, and I'm glad I did. I had another opportunity to go to Switzerland instead, and maybe my trajectory would have been completely different. However, Greece now is part of my life. I have clients there, I have contacts there, I have friends there, I visit Greece very often. I still know the language, and so there's nothing lost. You don't lose anything by doing and going through the experience. Yeah. So, like you said, Daniel, sometimes you just need to follow your heart. Mm-hmm. Just need to follow if it's really aligned, even if you haven't found your purpose. Because when you asked me in my 20s, what's your purpose? Even though it was a little bit clear where I wanted to go, I never looked beyond 2 or 3 years.
And you shouldn't, I think.
I was very much like, okay, I want to have fun. I want to have some funds to buy my own clothes, maybe to have a property sometime, at some point, to rent a space. You know, very simple things to be able to be independent, because at the time you crave independence. So one shouldn't think about it too much and overthink about situations. So yes, if you're going into that lost period. However, I still recommend, Daniel, and I don't know if you agree with me on this one, for people to have a trusted partners, mentors, leaders. They don't really need to have a title to be a leader. Yeah. Whoever they are.
Role models.
You know, people they inspire. It could be your aunt, it could be grandmothers, it could be anyone that are solid, are grounded, and usually having more than one really helps, because different people give you different perspectives. But having a small group of trusted individuals that can help and support you along that lost period, that lost journey, so to speak.
Yes, I totally agree on that. And these individuals might not give you what you're looking for in terms of experience. You might not have gone through what you're going through or you will go through in the future, but they will give you the values that you are trying to seek and trying to form at that point in time. And I'll share a question that I still ask myself today when I'm faced with a difficult decision. I ask myself, before I take this decision, if it goes left or right, will this reflect the individual I want to be in that situation? And it depends on the answer, I take the decision. If it's yes, I take the decision. If the answer is no, I don't take the decision. Whether I'm okay with being the individual I want to be or following that decision. But
how interesting.
You have to have some value, some form of value, so
to be able to guide you.
Yeah.
To be able as a guiding post, because if nowadays this is how I take my decisions, but obviously now my values are very clear because I've worked a lot to make sure that I have a set of values, my purpose, or again, it's a journey. You just refine them as you go along, and I make decisions based clearly on those values. If something doesn't fall within my values, within my purpose, then because now I'm in my 40s, I run away more quickly. Because in actual fact, the mindset at the moment is I don't have enough time. In the sense, why am I wasting time maybe? Time is more precious. Time has become really valuable of how I spend my time, with whom, how I grow, where do I go? Because time flies all of a sudden, and I wouldn't want to miss that, if you know what I mean. However, with going back to what you mentioned, it's what's the worst thing that can happen? So when you're taking a decision, and if you actually, one reflects a little bit more about, okay, so what's the worst thing? If I go south, what's the worst thing that can happen? And you added something really important. Will it affect the individual of who I am at the moment? Mm-hmm. Is it going to have an impact? If it's positive, then go ahead. Yeah. However, if your gut feeling is telling you that somehow it will tarnish who you have become or whom you are becoming, then one would think about it more than twice.
These are not the usual questions that we ask ourselves, and they might be a little bit tough to ask ourselves as well. So that is why having mentors and people who we trust that surrounds us is very, very important, because they'll pick us up when we are feeling a little bit lost on this. And having role models, they are showing us the way, but they are not hand-holding us necessarily to follow into their footsteps directly, but they're at least giving us some foothold to guide on our journey.
Loneliness is not an easy sentiment and emotion to deal with. It's not always easy, especially when one is going through a series of events that are out of his or her control. Yeah. So then that support will become even more important, Daniel, because obviously then the loneliness would lurk in, and the person would even go even deeper into his loneliness. So the power of exercise, as we know, that helps. The fact that we eat healthy, we walk, we jog, whatever. We don't need to be sports champions. However, exercise, we all know the positive effect that exercise has.
Definitely.
When I'm stressed, I always find and have my spots, and I'm feeling a bit lonely. Sometimes I go for the long run, and all of a sudden it's like I regain purpose. However, when it's a difficult time and you need a little bit of more intervention. So it's not, we shouldn't be afraid or ashamed to ask for help.
Definitely.
And for people to support us, for people, because we're all vulnerable. We're all living in a world where vulnerability maybe, we're not accustomed to vulnerability, to being vulnerable, to be weak, to be sensitive. And we all go through it. We all go through it. We're all, even the toughest ones, they're very vulnerable inside.
Yeah.
So it's very important that we find ways and means and support to support us along the way.
And we do live in a chaotic world, in the sense that there's always this comparison that then 50 years ago, 30 years ago, the world was different, and the generational gap and all of these things. But I truly believe that today, 2023, is more chaotic than 1990. Mainly because we are more aware of other fellow humans outside Malta. Let's pick Malta as an example. So the world is more chaotic because we know live what's happening all around the globe. So there is a lot of information going inside ourselves, and there are a lot of
it's happening much faster as well, Daniel. Everything is happening so fast. Even in terms of turmoil, geopolitical turmoil on its own, since COVID, it has been non-stop. And now with the Middle East area, and it seems that it's going to escalate a little bit more. So it's not an easy, pleasant, peaceful environment that we're living anymore.
Yeah.
There's always something happening somewhere. So that's why even our macro cosmic world is affecting these shifts.
And it does kind of have an effect on loneliness.
Totally.
Loneliness. And I think what
let's not go through the effects of social media. And the social media, I mean, there are studies nowadays that the lack of belonging and how to be part of the social media. I must admit, LinkedIn is my preferred social media channel. So and Instagram as well, because I love pictures. I'm very visual, so I love happy, nice nature pics usually. So less content and more photographs somehow.
That's the interesting part of the algorithm, that it gives you what you need so that you can stay longer on the app. So at least if you seek positive things, it will give you positive things as well. But if you seek news, for example, I don't follow.
Then Instagram
news.
Can be very negative.
Yes, it can. So it depends on
what you look for,
what you're looking for. So it happens on its own.
Yes. However, there is an effect. Yes, of definitely it affects individuals and groups of the belonging. So you might actually feel lonelier because it's all about how many likes, how many followers do I have. If I post something, if people find it interesting and not interesting, then am I good enough? Again, it's at another level now because we're competing at an international level. So it's very, very tricky.
I think it's a sad reality, but true in a way. I don't find it sad. I find it reassuring personally. But we are our own best friend. So there is no one who can give us more insurance than ourselves. So that is why I'm very fond of on self-growth, because if I train myself, you mentioned exercise. If I exercise my brain and my emotions well enough, then I'm able to handle me. And if I'm able to handle me, I'm able to handle others as well.
Totally.
And it's not about just embracing loneliness. It's just about, okay, I have whatever happens, what's the worst that can happen? I have me. Even if I'm lonely, I have me. And we've become accustomed not to feel comfortable, or this is an overarching statement perhaps, but we've become accustomed that we're not okay with just being on our own.
Because there is an expectation that even when we go to a restaurant and we find someone eating on his or her own, we're like, oh, how come?
Yeah.
I remember during my work trips, most of the time I used to be on my own, and I actually had, outside in cities, it's very common It's very common to find people on their own, walking on their own, eating at restaurants on their own, at coffee shops. Now it has become even more common with digital nomads having their laptop. They plug in from anywhere and work from anywhere, actually. So it's better in a way. However, yes, we're not very much at when we're socializing, especially the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
Mediterranean people, it's all about coming together, right? The coming together. Every other excuse, let's go for a coffee, let's go for a drink, let's go for a party, let's go for a meal. There's this togetherness, and we don't have a culture really of being on our own, but of belonging into a bigger group.
Mm-hmm.
So, however, we have to respect those people actually that actually enjoy being on their own, because I know a good number of people that feel better in smaller groups or actually on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And this is absolutely fine. We shouldn't judge. I think there's a lot of judgment, especially in small islands. I have this thing about small island syndrome. We do judge, we do think about what the others are doing all the time. We should allow things and people to actually live their own life as they would like to. And loneliness, it's okay. It's okay to be lonely sometimes. However, you mentioned something very important, Daniel. It's about the self-growth. And why is it important to continue growing? We're constantly work in progress. We're never a finished product.
Yeah.
And the idea is to have a toolbox, to have that set. If we have to look at it that way, where we can actually pick those tools, pick whatever works for us, to be able to handle different situations. And I think that is the beauty of self-growth, because we need to be strong for when the going gets tough.
Yeah.
And it's impossible that we're always on the high side, we're always at the top, because life is a journey.
Yeah.
Full of ups and downs. Otherwise, we're not being realistic.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you go through your self-growth program, Daniel?
Thank you for the interesting question.
You're welcome.
I'm a yes man, in the sense that when an opportunity arises, I find the difficulty to say no. And that is why I end up with having too much on my plate most often than not. And as long as if I'm collaborating with someone, as long as I see reciprocity in the passion that we have for that particular thing, my fire can reignite according to the other person. So I tend to be a feeler, so if I feel the energy of the individual and can do something with them, it's just it will run like wildfire. So that is one thing I would say, and I'm very fond on trying different things. What I have to become better at is closing chapters at times, because I have too many things going on. So I need to learn how to close certain aspects. The podcast helps, so because every episode teaches me something different, because I'm meeting with someone different. Like yourself, we never met until today, so it's
true.
We never had such conversations, and you asked me a very interesting question, something that I would have to ponder after our episode as well. So yes, the podcast is one of the things that helps me grow personally. How about you?
I knew it was coming back.
For sure.
Basically, Daniel, I make sure that I check in with myself constantly. So through my clients help me grow, because we're faced with challenges, decisions at board level that change livelihoods of all the families and all the businesses. It's not just the business, right? It's all the employees and the livelihoods, the suppliers and everyone. There is a whole different levels of stakeholders to a business that obviously a decision that you take at that level might have so many ramifications on all the different stakeholders. So definitely those challenges help me grow quite a lot, because we make sure we future-proof it as much as possible. We make sure that we are responsible, obviously, together with a group of people at a governance level to ensure that we are moving according to good governance. And what we believe that it would be the best for the company, its shareholders, and its stakeholders, including the employees, obviously. So those moments, even though they're very, very difficult and challenging, they help me to grow, because obviously you go through them with an open eye and make sure that you evaluate everything and you don't know everything. So I have to go back to the drawing board sometimes, because we decide to postpone the decision for later, depending on how important the decision is for that organization. So I make sure, to go back to your question, that I choose those clients that will challenge my own growth, inevitably.
Okay, how would you know?
Because for example, I fit more with companies that are going through growth trajectories, that I know that are shifting from point A to point B, for example, from a revenue structure, or that they are investing into new capital projects. And again, they would be linked with my own values, that they're doing something good as well for society. Nowadays, I give a lot of importance to that as well. So I make sure that I choose the right clients. Less is more in my mind. That is the mantra I move by. And that I constantly I still look, but not in a restless manner nowadays, because I know what's good enough. I know what's good enough in terms of growth, as I wouldn't want it to be toxic. I look for opportunities either to study, to network with different cultures, with different companies across borders, because that is how I find that I can expand my growth mindset. And this is why I'm working with companies outside of Malta as well. I find that experience very nourishing and very, very challenging in its own way, because you need to be, in each and different country that you work in, there are cultures that need to be respected. There are people, there are laws, there are regulations, there are also things which are not usually written. You don't really read these things on books. However, you have to learn by doing. So it takes me back on experiencing the world first-hand basis, so to speak. And over there, this is how I go through my growth process. I don't know if I have answered your question.
I think so, and you made me actually remember, you made me realize of how can I respond to your question better in a way. And this is actually a concept that I verbalized when I was around 17 years old. I still remember this because something particular happened at that point in time. And I verbalized it without realizing the concept of it. And at that point in time, I was called as not being authentic in my approach. And I couldn't understand the person in me telling me that I was not being authentic, but at the same time, I knew that I was being authentic. So, and this is the story, anyway. So I was always very fond of meeting new people and seeing myself with new people. And this is one of the drivers of the podcast as well, coming to think about, because I'm seeing myself interacting with you, Nadia, today, something that never happened before until today. So I'm rediscovering myself, a version of myself interacting with you. So it's like growing fraction by fraction with each individual that you interact with. And at that point in time, I was able to verbalize it, but I wasn't able to make sense out of it because I was still too.
And now the penny dropped, Daniel.
Yes. It did. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to remember this concept.
You're more than welcome on that.
Nadia, it's been a pleasure hosting you. You've been a great guest. You've asked me some interesting questions today.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I really hope that whoever is listening to this podcast will equally enjoy this conversation as much as we did.
I'm sure.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.